Hello and welcome to Pictorial Planet. My name is John Finch. Last week I went out to 7 Mile Beach to photograph a World War II bunker. The lighting was flat, the sun never appeared. I was a bit disappointed at the flat lighting, but the photograph itself has some merit. And so this week we're going to print one of the negatives. Now, if you remember, I used FP4 and I ran it through at an EI of 200 because I was using FX55 developer, and FX55 gives us an extra 2/3 of a stop in film speed with FP4. It does a similar thing with HP5 and PAN-F as well. So this week it's going to be a pretty straightforward printing session. Although the negatives were a little flat in some areas, the sky was very bright. So there's a lot of contrast between the ground and the sky, and we're going to look at how we deal with that this week. So let's get over to the darkroom and let's crack on, because I'm dying to have a go at printing this particular negative. And here are the negatives on the light table. And as you can see, there's a good contrast in the negatives. I'm happy with the development. I developed the FP4 in FX55 for 7.5 minutes. And that 7.5 minutes was using Ilford agitation. You'll see more about that kind of thing in my books. Now, as you can see, there's some nice negatives here. I liked this shot here. This has got that leading line running up towards the bunker and then onward into the distance. I like that one. And these ones are from the other side, if you remember, where I shot with the open doorway of the bunker, keeping it on the right-hand side. But looking at all of these through my loop, I decided this one was my favorite. I like the detail in the foreground here. There's some nice highlights of the wet sand, and the stones are nice and sharp. Everything's pretty good in this shot. But looking at this negative, you can probably see that the sky is very bright compared to the ground, and it's going to be this that's going to be the problem with printing this particular negative. In fact, all the negatives. It's not an unusual problem to have a bright sky with a regularly exposed ground. So this video today will help you deal with these skies. And the first thing I need to do with all my negatives of all my shoots is to create a contact print. And to do that, we're going to put the negatives on top of a piece of paper like this and then expose it by shining just white light onto it from the enlarger, and that will give us a contact print, and we can assess much better these negatives. It's important you do that because you will see different things. You will see extra detail. You'll have a better idea of your shadows compared to your highlights. All kinds of advantages in seeing the negatives when they're in a contact print like this. So I use a contact printer. These are commonly available, and you can get these on eBay. You can probably get them through many photographic shops. And it's basically just a piece of glass that you can pop down, and it holds the negatives tightly against the paper. Now, of course, this is not a real piece of photographic paper. I would have ruined it by now, of course, in the light, wouldn't I? So I would do all of this in red safe light, get the contacts on there. I make a test strip of 3 of the negatives by using a small piece of paper and work out which of those will be the best exposure for this contact strip. So let's have a look at my test strip from this here. And here is the test strip of the negatives. And for this I used 5, 10 and 15 seconds underneath the white light from the enlarger. And I have a video on making these contact prints. So you should really watch that and get an idea of how I do this. Now, this one here is the 10 seconds, and if I was going to print from this, I would say it's slightly too long. However, being slightly dark helps me a lot because I can see detail in the bright sky, and that's important for later on when I decide how to print this negative. But this one down here are a little darker than I would like, but that's a good thing, and I'll show you why right now. Here's my contact sheet, and as you can see, I've printed it down a little bit. It's a little bit dark, but there's a good reason for that. And I think I got this idea from Eddie Oframs from one of his books many years ago. And he said, if you print it down, you will see the highlight detail. So you can decide, in this case, for instance, which sky I like the most, which clouds I like the most. But he also said, in order to see the darker mid and lower tones, the shadow detail, for instance, you just have to light it from behind. And you can do that by holding it up to a window and looking through it with the light coming in from the window behind it. That's an easy way of doing that. But I like to use my light table, and I'll just adjust there we are. And with my light table, I can now see all the detail I need in the shadows. So without the light table on, I can pick my best clouds, and with the light table on, I can now see all of the shadow detail and pick the best best negatives for shadow detail. So a very useful trick from Eddie Oframs there that I'd like to pass on for you. I can get down with my loupe now, and I can check which of these is the best in focus and sharpest. And then I'll choose one of the negatives to print. And I've actually already chosen one. It's going to be this negative here. I like it particularly because it's got a lovely lead in here, this leading line leading up to the bunker and then onward out into the distance. And I like this detail here of the beach. So this was my favorite shot. It was the one where I got the camera high up so that I got a nice white line. Can you see that nice light line on the roof of the bunker, which separates it really well from the trees behind? So let's go onward. Let's take this negative and get it in the enlarger and see what it's going to give us. I have the negative in the enlarger now, and I've opened up the lens to its widest aperture, which is 5.6 with my lens. And now I'm going to focus this negative. Now it's important you do that with the lens at its widest setting. And this is because by getting accurate focus at the widest setting, when you close down the 2 stops or so that you need to for your printing and should do for your printing, then you will be in focus because you'll get a little bit of extra depth of field for those grains that you focused on. So I always focus wide open and then close down. Now here's a tip. If you can't focus because the grain is so fine that you just can't get it with it wide open, then you have to shut down the lens to focus it. You've got no option. But otherwise, for a normal negative like this, I can just see the grain. It's very fine with FX55 and FP4, especially medium format. I can just see the grain, so I've got it focused now. So the next thing then is to shut down the lens. 2 stops for me. This puts it in its optimum quality, its optimum sharpness. And I will do a test strip. I already have a good idea that this is going to be round about 10 seconds, 9 seconds. So I'll do a quick test strip and then I'll come back to you with that result. Here's another tip for you. I do all my test strips and my first print test with a grade 2 filter. That filter is the middle ground. It's the middle filter for me. And so I do my tests with grade 2 and then I will decide on which grade it should be printed at. And we'll talk about that shortly. But some people have asked me, what grade filter should I be using for my test strips and for my initial print? Always grade 2. So now I'm going to make my first test strip of the negative, and I've chosen 5-second intervals. So I have 5 seconds set up on my timer, and I'll do the first 5 seconds. And you may have noticed that I'm test stripping the ground, not the sky. It's the ground that's the most important thing to me. So that's the one I need to get right for my exposure. So now the second, I'm covering up, not taking away. Look, I'm covering up a part of the test strip there, and I'm going to give another 5 seconds. Great, so that's had an extra stop, if you like, from the first strip that I did. So I'm going to cover up now again, and I'm going to give it 2 times 5 seconds. That's the first one, and the second one. There. So we've had 5, 10, 20 seconds. This is f-stop printing. Each of those different parts of the test strip is one stop difference between the other. So I'll go over and develop this, and we'll have a look at it. Here is the test strip. You can see 5, 10, 20 seconds. So they're one stop apart are these exposures. And I like the 10. It's flat. There's no doubt about it. It's a little bit flat at grade 2. But grade 2 does give me the opportunity to see a lot of detail. So I like the detail. I like that it's sharp. And so I'm going to use slightly less than the 10 seconds. I'm going to go for 8 seconds. And I'm going to up the grade to grade 3. So it's going to need at least grade 3 as this print. But we did say that, didn't we, last week, that it was very flat lighting. So let's get that one done, and we'll have a look at it. Here's our 8-second exposure at grade 3. And I place the print upside down in the developer to start with and set the clock. And then after 10 to 15 seconds, I gently turn it over. Here we are. It's 15 seconds now. Slide it back into the developer like so. And then what I'm looking for is the picture. Now I can see it coming through. Can you see that? And that was at 20 seconds. And so what I do now is I give 5 times that appearance time. So 20 seconds times 5, which is 100 seconds. So I know after 100 seconds, this will be developed just right. If it took 25 seconds to appear, I would give it 5 times 25 seconds. If it took it 40 seconds to appear, I would give it 5 times 40 seconds. What this does is, as my developer ages on a long session and starts to slow down development of the prints, I can adjust because it appears at a slightly later time. And so I just adjust, I multiply by 5 whenever I see the midtones just starting to appear. So it's had 1¼ minutes now. This never gets old, does it? Watching these appear. It's a wonderful experience, is darkroom printing. Okay, that's 90 seconds. So at 90 seconds, I'm now going to drain it and put it in the stop bath. There, 100 seconds, it's in the stop, perfect. And here's our print. So this is the first one, grade 3, and it's looking pretty good. I'm liking it. I'd like a little bit more mood to it. I'd like it to be a bit darker. So maybe I'll increase the well, I have 2 choices, don't I, when we think about this. I could increase the exposure to make it a bit darker, or I could increase the grade. If you remember, we expose, when we're enlarging, we expose for the highlights. It's the opposite of regular photography where we expose for the shadows. In the darkroom, it's the opposite. Everything's reversed. So we expose for the highlights and we use the grade for the shadows, so the darker areas of the print. So if I increase the grade, it will darken it and get a little bit more moody, and I would like that. So I'm going to increase it to grade 3.5, but keep the exposure the same. That will keep my highlights bright, which I want. The other thing is these trees. These trees look very meh to me. There's nothing to them. They're kind of grey. I'd like to darken those as well. Now this is handy because there is no sky. Look at that. And yet when we looked at the contact print, we could see there was a good sky there. There is good clouds there. And of course the reason is this is the exposure we're working on at the moment, and this is burned out. So I need to darken the sky. And by darkening the sky, I will also darken these trees. I'll be able to bring down and burn in the sky and burn in these trees a little bit. And that will set this thing off a little bit more. It'll give it that darker, grittier, kind of World War II feel, which I want. You know, this isn't a pretty picture of a flower. This is a picture of a World War II bunker. So I want it to look gritty and tough and hard. So let's see if we can do that. I'm going to increase to grade 3.5, and I'm going to burn in the sky. I'll do a test print just to see how much to burn the sky in. I'll come back to you with that. Here's my test print for the sky. And I've just run a little piece, a clipping of paper across the sky just above the trees, so I can catch these clouds and find out what exposure I need. Now this first part here is the regular 8-second exposure. So then I've added 1/3 of a stop to each of these. So the first 1/3 of a stop, the clouds are starting to come in. The second 1/3, they're getting some good detail in those clouds. And the last one I like a lot. Look at that. That's really starting to show off this sky better. So that's plus 1 stop. 1, 2, 3/3, 1 stop extra exposure. So I'm going to burn my sky in by 1 stop. I'll also include the trees in that burning in, so they'll darken too. And we're going to start now getting a gritty picture. And I'm ready. I've got my paper all ready. I've got my burning in card here ready. So the first full exposure of 8 seconds. I'm going to stand very still because I don't want any vibration in the enlarger at all, so be very gentle at this point. There we are, that's those first 8 seconds. And now I'm going to burn that sky in. So I'm going to hold the board over the print, and I'm holding it a little higher so that it's going to catch the light well before it gets to the paper. Don't hold it near the paper, hold it up high. It also means that the edge will be completely out of focus, which helps hide any burning in. And I'm going to burn it in for 8 seconds. Here we go. I'm going to moving it constantly. There's the trees. Just going to burn those in. See how I move that constantly? And that will stop an obvious burn-in line. So it should look much more natural. So let's have a look at that. We'll develop that print now. Here's the print, fresh out the wash. And it needs to dry down a bit, of course, because it will darken slightly as it dries down. But having a quick look at it now, it's looking good. I'm starting to get a sky. I need to darken it a little bit more. This doesn't seem as dark as my test strip was, so I'm going to give it a little bit of extra exposure, maybe 1 1/3 of a stop. And the reason that it's not as dark probably as the test strip is because I put the paper over it, the card over it, and I burn in like this, moving around. And so I'm actually not giving it the full 8 seconds, the full 1 stop. So I need to up that slightly, and I'll give it 1.5 stops, but still do the same pattern with my card. The trees are looking better. They've darkened nicely. And the ground is looking good too. I'm liking this grade 3. It's lovely. It's nice. You know, I could even go up to grade 3.5, which would punch it up even more, which I might do. Looking at this, a little bit more contrast would be nice, especially as I'm going to tone this. And to tone a print, it's always good to print it a little bit dark because the toning lifts the print a tad. So I'm going to go up to grade 3.5, keep my exposure the same as 8 seconds, And finally, after burning in the sky, I'm going to burn in the edges by 1/3 of a stop. Just burn in those edges, and that will help focus the eye into the center of the image. So let me show you that. Okay, so we'll give it its initial 8 seconds, and I'm on grade 3.5 now. Just darkening it a little bit more in the shadows and the dark end. There we are. Now I'm going to burn in the sky, and I'm going to give it 12 seconds to burn in the sky, and that should take into account the fact that I'm not there to get those trees. It'll take into account that I'm moving this card and make the sky a little bit darker. I burn skies in often on my photographs, but usually they only need about half of a stop extra exposure. So this needing at least 1 stop, maybe 1.5 stops extra exposure, just shows the flatness of the day and how it was hard to expose for the ground and with that bright sky. So finally, I'm going to burn in the edges, all around these edges here. And I'll do that just by counting. And I usually do 1/3 of a stop, so I'm going to count to 3 with the exposure here. So I'll show you that. All right, so switch on the enlarger, and 1, 2, 3. There we are. And I'll do the bottom. Yep. 1, 2, 3. And I'll do the top. 1, 2, 3. There we are. So that now will focus the eye more into the center of the image. Let's develop this and see what it looks like. Now it's starting to come together. The sky is much better. I like that a lot. It's really got a nice depth to it. And there's this lovely bright area around the horizon. The trees are darker, which I like, more ominous. And so is the foreground. This grade 3.5 has improved the image, I'm sure. I'm really liking it a lot now. The final thing I think to do then with this print is to tone it, and I'm going to sepia tone it in thiourea, and we'll see what that looks like. But I think not fully toned, but just a little bit toned to warm it up a bit. Someone asked me recently, how can I warm up my multi-grade classic paper? So the answer is just to tone it. Tone it in thiourea, and you'll get a lovely warm print. And that's what I'll do with this next. So the final stage is to add a little bit of warmth to that print. I have my bleach here, and I have my toner. The bleach is made with 1.5 teaspoons of potassium ferrocyanide and 1.5 teaspoons of potassium bromide added to 1 litre of water. That is not Farmer's Reducer, so don't mix the two up. Farmer's Reducer has got hypo in it, which fixes the print. We don't want any hypo in this bleach because we're going to redevelop it in this toner. So once we've bleached the print a little bit, we'll then put it in the toner. The toner is made up of 1.5 teaspoons of thiourea added to 100 milliliters of water first of all. I put that in that jug there. And 1.5 teaspoons of sodium hydroxide added to 100 milliliters of cold water. I put it in there. And then I add 28 milliliters of that and 28 milliliters of that to 500 milliliters of water, half a liter. So that's the toner, the redeveloper. Now we must make sure our print is absolutely washed, which it is, and I'm going to add it to this bleach. But it's going to go in there for a very short time because this bleach acts quite quickly, and we're not fully toning this print. We're just wanting to add a little bit of warmth. So I'm going to make sure that I've got my clock ready, and I'm going to give my print just 15 seconds maximum. In fact, after 10 seconds, I'm going to take it out of there and move it into this water, which will add up to about 15 seconds total bleaching. And then we'll have this water washing out the bleach. Once all the bleach has washed out of the print, which takes about 10 minutes, I'm going to put it in the toner and we'll see it warm up. All right, so here we go. I'm just going to give it this 10 seconds before I take it out. There it goes, it's in. And I'm going to move it around. That's 5. That's coming up to 10. I'm going to drain it. And at 15 seconds, it's in the water. It will keep on bleaching a little bit. I'll just start that running. It'll keep on bleaching slightly in that water, but not a lot. It's now washing that bleach out. And in 10 minutes time, I'm going to add it to the toner. So I'll catch up with you then. So the print has been washing now for 10 minutes. So I'll just give you a look at that. There we are. It doesn't look very bleached, does it? But it is, believe me, there's been some bleaching in the highlights. And the way this bleach works is it starts in the highlights. So we expect the highlights to get a slightly warm tone now, a slightly yellow-brown tone. So I'm going to pop it into there. Now I don't really have to time this because we're going to tone this to completion. Oh, look at that. It's already getting a nice warm tone. Look at that. Oh, it's beautiful. I really love how this toner works. And we just give it a little agitation there. The clouds have warmed up. The sand has warmed up. That's lovely. We've still got plenty of contrast. And that is the advantage of doing a very slight bleaching and then toning, because we don't lose that contrast. When you fully tone in thiourea and you fully bleach and then wash and then tone, you do lose some contrast. So you tend to do that when you've made prints, or rather you make prints slightly darker than you would normally if you're going to fully tone. But with what we're doing here, which is just adding this nice warmth to this print, it looks really lovely. I'm looking forward to showing you this. When you have just toned it for warmth, you don't lose that contrast. So let's just pop that in here for a quick wash, and then I'll show you what it looks like. There we are. And there. That is our warmed up and toned print. And one of my patrons will be receiving this print, because I'm going to put all your names into a spreadsheet, and I'm going to run a random number generator, and one of you will win this print and I will send it to you. The full deal patrons' names will be entered twice, and the regular patrons will be entered once. So you have got a chance of winning this actual print. And I'm going to be doing that with all my prints over the next coming weeks. So if you want a chance to win one of these prints, please join my Patreon, support the channel, support the work I'm doing. Thank you very much. Thank you to my patrons. I really appreciate you guys standing by me so long. I really do. Thank you all for watching this video. Please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share the channel as much as you can. Let's get more people watching this, because I really want to help people understand their work with film and darkrooms. So thank you all, and I will see you next week for another photograph.